Antabahivaya Vaishatma. Yasmin, in such sacrificial ceremonies, Harihi, the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan, the Personality Godhead, Ijamanaha, being worshipped, Ijatma, the soul of all worshipable deities, Mortihi, in the forms, Yajatam, those who worship, Sam, welfare, Tanoti, spreads, Kaman, desires, Amogan, inviolable, Stila Jagamanam, of all the moving and non-moving, Antaha, within, Bahihi, outside, Vayahu, air, Eva, like, Shaha, of all of them, Atma, spirit soul. Translation per Sanskrit says, He Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. In all sacrificial ceremonies, although sometimes the demigod is worshipped, the Supreme Lord, Personality Godhead, is worshipped because He is the super soul of everyone and exists both inside and outside like the air. Thus, it is He only who awards all welfare to the worshipper. Please repeat. In all sacrificial ceremonies, although sometimes a demigod is worshipped, the Supreme Lord, Personality Godhead, is worshipped because He is the super soul of everyone and exists both inside and outside like the air. Thus it is He only who awards all welfare to the worshipper. Purport. It is even sometimes seen that demigods like Indra and Chandra are worshipped and offered sacrificial awards, yet the rewards of all such sacrifices are awarded to the worshipper by the Supreme Lord, and it is the Lord only who can offer all welfare to the worshipper. The demigods, although worshipped, cannot do anything without the sanction of the Lord, because the Lord is the super soul of everyone, both moving and non-moving. In Bhagavad Gita 9.23, the Lord Himself confirms this in the following shloka: Ye pe anya devata bhakta yajante shradayam vataha te pe pam mam eva kuntaya yajanti evida purvakam. Whatever a man may sacrifice to other gods, O son of Kunti, is really meant for me alone, but is offered without true understanding. The fact is that the Supreme Lord is one without a second. There is no God other than the Lord Himself. Thus the Supreme Lord is eternally transcendental to the material creation, but there are many who worship the demigods like the sun, the moon and Indra, who are only material representatives of the Supreme Lord. These demigods are indirect, qualitative representations of the Supreme Lord. A learned scholar or devotee, however, knows who is who. Therefore, he directly worships the Supreme Lord and is not diverted by the material, qualitative representations. Those who are not so learned worship such qualitative material representations, but their worship is unceremonious because it is irregular. So as we know, in all these modern times, particularly Western conception of time, time is linear in that it starts at a certain point and it just continues on ad infinitum. Whereas in the Vedic concept, time is cyclic. It's like circular. It repeats itself over and over. So whilst the Vedic time obviously has seconds, as days, months, years, etc., but the millennia is divided up into 4 yugas: Satya, Treta, Dwarpa, Kali. So the Satya Yuga goes for about 1.6 million years, exemplified by austerity, compassion, truthfulness and cleanliness. And then after that is, for about 1.2 million years, is Treta Yuga. And slowly these qualities are diminishing. And then after that, Dwarpa Yuga. And then, of course, Kali Yuga. And all that's left is some truthfulness. And that is diminishing also, as we see in this story. This Kali, dressed as a king, is beating the last remaining leg of Dharma, which is represented as truthfulness. So, of course, Dwarpa goes for about 800 or so thousand years, and then Kali Yuga 432,000 years, which are about 5,000 years into it. So this particular pastime is taking place just at the beginning of Kali Yuga. And so we can, situate ourselves in that sort of position. We know where we're situated. Modern history, if you're studying ancient history, you might go back about 2000 BC or so. And anything beyond that is just very vague. The scientists are depending on, written records, or they examine fossils and they do some carbon dating and they work out somehow or other, but their ancient, very ancient history is very vague. Actually, I read an article years ago about information storage, and this was back in the mid-90s, I guess, and they were saying that with computer technology, every year the speed of computers is doubling. I think, or maybe every 14 months, the speed of the computers is doubling, and so the storage methods have to keep up with that. So when I first got my first computer, the hard drive was only about it was about 8 megabyte or something. I mean, it was ridiculous compared to what it is now. But basically, back then it was CD drives, and then, now we've got MP3, and every couple of years there's a new system. But the article was saying that the shelf life of each system of information storage is shorter than the previous one, because everything is going faster and faster. And sort of tongue-in-cheek, the author mentioned that if you want something to last forever, you need to carve it on stone tablets, because 20,000 years later someone will find it and they'll be able to read what it is. And I mentioned that the Scientology had spent $20 million engraving their books onto stainless steel tablets, so that a CD disc is only good if you've got a CD player to play it on. So anyway, it's just a side point, but the thing is that from the Vedic understanding, we can go back ancient history. We're not depending on the modern scientific methodologies that, well, if it's beyond a couple of thousand years BC, we don't know anything. So this is going back about 5,000 years. And so the beginning of Kali Yuga. So this particular point that we're hearing, of course, this is Maharaj Parikshit speaking to the Kali personified, and he's mentioning, basically his point is that because of your qualities, you can't exist in my kingdom, which was basically the entire world at that time, practically speaking, because the influence of Kali Yuga is very degrading. All sinful activity is been inspired by this personality of Kali. So, and because Maharaj Parikshit, he was seeing himself as the representatives of the Pandavas and ultimately representative of the Supreme Lord Krishna. He saw it as his duty as a Raja Rishi to kick out all inauspicious or sinful influences. So therefore Kali was the personification of that. So basically he was preparing to kill Kali because that was his duty as the as the monarch. And he mentions, we heard yesterday, that O friend of irreligion, you do not deserve to remain in a place where experts perform sacrifices according to truth and religious principles for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he goes on, today in all sacrificial performances, even although sometimes a demigod is worshipped, Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipped because he is super soul of everyone. So Prabhupada comments on this point about demigods. Of course, in the West, worshipping demigods is really a non-issue because it's not in our culture. The closest thing we might have, perhaps with Christianity, is angels, but that's all a little bit vague. But in India, particularly with Hinduism, the attraction to worshipping demigods is very, very strong. And therefore, Prabhupada, he stresses this a lot. And so becoming devotees in the West, we're very fortunate in one sense that we don't have to overcome that influence. You see I answer a lot of questions on one forum called Quora Questions and Answers. And there's a lot of Indians, they're writing on there about Hinduism and religion, etc. And they're all very caught up in worshipping demigods. And there's a lot of mention of ISKCON there. Obviously, ISKCON preaching in India is quite strong. And they ask, why don't ISKCON worship demigods? Why don't we see any demigods in their altar? Why are they only worshipping Krishna? A lot of questions like that. So it's a good opportunity for preaching. But nevertheless, we don't have that sort of, you could almost say, handicap that we have to overcome that influence that, Krishna is okay, but if you really want something, you have to worship the demigods. Krishna will just take away everything. Just look at the Pandavas. He took away everything. It's so that sort of mentality there. And also another strong influence where coming from India is the Mayavad philosophy. ISKCON, or coming in our Sampradaya, and the other three Vaishnava Sampradayas, very few others are really presenting more Vaishnava or personal philosophy. Mayavad philosophy, very, very strong. And once again on this Quora site, so many people are talking about, they're trying to understand what the Brahman is. They're thinking everything is coming from Brahman. When I achieve moksha, do I go into the Brahman? Or, they're throwing around terms. They really don't know what they really mean, because it is very confusing, and especially when you get the so-called spiritual masters, gurus, who are presenting this sort of idea, and they are very influential. They can have tens of thousands of followers. So, when Prabhupada came to the West, he wrote his mission statement that preaching voidism and impersonalism, particularly in the Western world, that nivashesha sunyavadi pasachar desatarane. So therefore, because he considered that his mission statement, it is there in all his books. He's stressing defeating Mayavad philosophy and countering the influence of demigod worship. So as Vaishnavas, of course, we're not offensive to demigods. We understand that they're servants of Krishna, but we understand, as Prabhupada mentions here, that they're dependents, like anything one may get from the demigods themselves are dependent on the sanction of Krishna himself. It's like the government ministers. They have a portfolio and they have certain parameters. They can have some influence, but ultimately they're not completely independent. They have to work within the view and the vision of the Prime Minister. They can't. Sometimes his demigod worship is almost compared to bribing one of the government ministers. Instead of going to the top and going through the official channels, you try to sort of go behind the system and bribe one of the ministers, try to get something on the on the side, sort of thing. So but as I said, we're very fortunate because Prabhupada has given us this Vedic philosophy without that influence of Mayavad philosophy or demigod worship. So I found one quote from the Skanda Purana. It mentions that a person who worships demigods and gives up Lord Vasudeva is like a man who gives up the shelter of his mother for the shelter of a witch. So many verses like this condemning demigod worship. So back in the 70s, Jayapataka Swami, he was speaking to Prabhupada. He mentions that why do they, mention to the general public, why do they worship demigods? They can get their material facilities from Krishna also. It's like a question. And Prabhupada said, yes, that is recommended. First of all, Sastra recommends that if you want this thing, you worship this deity, that deity. In this way, at last, it is said that you can get anything if you worship Krishna. That is said, akama sava kamova moksha kama uhataridi trivrena bhakti yogena. That is for the purpose that if he wants to take advantage, material benefit from Krishna, then Krishna bhajan will be there. Gradually, they'll forget this material benefit. They will become pure devotee, just like Dhruva became. So that verse that Prabhupada quoted, akama sava kamova, so translations from Bhagavatam 2.3.10, a person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of material desire, without any material desire or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. So he mentions Dhruva, that's a classic example of one who was approaching Krishna for desire of wealth. It's not that he just wanted some gold or a big bank account or a nice house. He wanted a whole kingdom, planet, if you like, greater than his great-grandfather's Lord Brahma. So, he was thinking big. But, and of course we know the story, he was rejected by his father's the favourite mother. And so he went back home, and his mother suggested that if you want to see God, you can go to the forest. So he went to the forest, and Narada Muni by providence was sent there and tested Dhruva Maharaj, but saw his determination and gave him the mantra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So very quickly Dhruva Maharaj was able to take darshan of Lord Vishnu, and and that's that famous verse that I was aspiring for broken glass, but now I have found the greatest diamond. So it's a classic example that even if you approach Krishna for material things, because Krishna is there in your life, you're going to be slowly purified, and ultimately you realize that these material things are ultimately worthless. And also have that example of that man who was worshipping Shiva, and his desire was to get the most valuable thing, and Shiva appeared to him and said, you go and see Sanatana Goswami, he has the most valuable thing. And so he went to Sanatana Goswami and said, I'm asking for the most valuable thing. And Sanatana Goswami said, I have a touchstone, it's out the back in the refuse pit. And so very eagerly he took that touchstone, but then he got a little bit intelligent. If this is the most valuable thing, why was Sanatana Goswami leaving it in the rubbish pit. So then he come back and Sanatana Goswami, yes, I can give you the most valuable thing, you just throw that away first. So then he engaged him in bhakti yoga. We're not all, well, at least speaking for myself, we're not all pure devotees when we first come to Krishna consciousness. We have many material desires, but slowly, because we're worshipping Krishna, all these material desires can be purified, and ultimately we're only aspiring for Krishna himself. And we have to be a little bit patient. It takes time, but it's a daily process. Every day we're engaged in remembrance of Krishna. The whole morning program is all about remembering Krishna, keeping Krishna within our mind, within our intelligence, and remembrance. So slowly, every day, a little bit closer to Krishna. So in that verse, Kama Sava Kama Va, Prabhupada mentioned the purport that even one who desires to merge into the impersonal Brahmajyoti must also worship the Lord by Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is especially stressed here as the means of all perfection. It has been stated that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal of both Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, and it is emphatically declared that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal of the different varieties of worship. So he goes on, the akama, or without desire, is one who has no material desire. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this desirelessness as bhajaniya parama purusha sukha matra swa sukhatvam in his Sandarbha. This means that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. Such superb feelings were exhibited by the damsels of Brajabhumi for the happiness of the Lord. The gopis loved the Lord without any return, and this is the perfect exhibition of the akama spirit. Karma spirit, or the desire for one's own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world, whereas the spirit of akama is fully exhibited in the spiritual world. So the gopis, they're put on the topmost platform of devotees of Krishna because they didn't want anything for themselves at all. They were ready to give up all their household affairs and their children, their husbands, and their household duties. As soon as they heard Krishna's flute, they just dropped everything and went. They were ready to give up, their reputation and their basically everything material. They considered secondary to go to meet Krishna in the forest. So this is the exemplary, or the topmost platform of one who is akama, or without any material desire. And even though it's also said that Radharani, she is the topmost example of this, that she's praised that even if my suffering brings pleasure to Krishna, may I always be suffering. So, in a material sense, it sounds like there's some issues there, but from a topmost spiritual platform, this is the topmost mentality of akama, of without any desire for one's own satisfaction. If my suffering brings pleasure to Krishna, may I always suffer in that way. And we have the story that Krishna had a headache and the queens of Dwarka were trying to, or was it Narada Muni, trying to find Krishna said that they would be cured by the dust of my devotees. So Narada Muni was trying to find a devotee who would offer the dust of their feet to Krishna. Even his queens of Dwarka refused to do that. And eventually he came to the gopis, and the gopis immediately offered. And he said, "You're not afraid of going to hell by offering your foot dust to Krishna?" It says, "We don't care if we go to hell as long as Krishna's headache is cured." So that's the same mentality. They're not interested for their own happiness. It's only the happiness of Krishna. So another verse from Bhagavad Gita, those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So this intelligence stolen by material desire. So, but nevertheless, it is the Vedic system that, worshipping the Devas, at least there's some mentality that there's somebody greater than themselves, rather than they thinking that they're the centre of the universe and everybody should serve them. They're thinking that at least I can worship the demigods, even if there's material desires. So it is a recommended method, but it's just not the highest understanding. And we have the example of Srila Vyasadeva. He presented the Vedas, but still wasn't completely satisfied. So his Guru Narada Muni appeared and explained that what you've done, you've given so many rules and regulations for people to elevate themselves, more like a karma yoga mentality, that you're following rules and regulations to enjoy in this world, and slowly you elevate. But unfortunately, particularly in this Kali Yuga, people are very unfortunate, short-lived, poor memory, etc. And they'll just take the easy way out, that never mind trying to elevate themselves, but just try to enjoy this material world. So therefore, Narada Muni gave the recommendation, you write this Srimad Bhagavatam focusing only on Krishna. And so we understand that just after the disappearance of Krishna at the end of Dwapara Yuga, that Srimad Bhagavatam manifested itself as the literary incarnation of Krishna. And so this is really the only sastra that is valid in Kali Yuga. Because it's in the first few verses, it kicks out this cheating mentality of desiring, karma and gyan, trying to enjoy the material world maybe through Vedic injunction. So Kaitavadharma, this cheating mentality. So that Kavi Chandra Maharaj, he preaches quite a lot in Africa, and he says the Christian preaching there is very strong. And said years ago in the beginning, they would say that, if you worship, if you become a Christian, we'll give you food, we'll give you a house. There was some sort of, promise like that. But he said now, just all they do, said if you worship Jesus, then money will come from heaven. They're just very blatant like that. And they have, you can see on YouTube, there's clips like somebody who's pretending to be crippled, and they hobble on stage, and then the priest touches them, and then they're jumping around, all of a sudden cured. And all these innocent people, they're thinking, that, I'll become a Christian because then this Kaitavadharma is so rife in Kali Yuga, this cheating mentality that if you follow this so-called religious process, then so many material benefits will be there. Because of course, a lot of these traditions are more or less materialistic in the sense that they're, the ultimate goal is to go to heaven to enjoy. And of course, heaven within is still within the material universe. So therefore, the concept, many people don't have this concept that, they're thinking the ultimate goal is heaven, but that's somehow or other beyond this material universe. It's somewhere you go forever. But we're fortunate that we have information from Bhagavatam that, also these same traditions, they say, if you reject this worship, you'll go to hell forever. Or if you follow this process, you go to heaven forever. But these places are all in the material world. So material by definition means temporary. So even if you do go to heaven or you fall down to hell, these are temporary situations because they're within the material world. So the ultimate goal is the Hindus use this word moksha quite a bit, but I can understand most don't really know what it actually means. But for the Vaishnava, moksha means achieving the Vaikuntha planets. It's not going to Goloka Vrindavan, but it's like in the mood of awe and reverence, you're entering into the Vaikuntha planets. But for the Mayavadis and personalists, moksha means entering into the Brahman, impersonal liberation. But of course, we don't want either. We're not after moksha, we're after Krishna Prem. So therefore, every day we're engaged in our sadhana, and gradually that Haladini Shakti, Radharani, is transferring, transforming our heart from lust into prem. And slowly, that's the ultimate goal, is achieving Krishna Prem. So regardless where we take our next birth, the Vaishnava is just thinking, we don't care where we go, but ultimately we want to achieve Krishna Prem. Because when you have that pure love of Krishna, then everything else is just secondary. But the highest platform of the jiva is basically to be a surrendered servant of Krishna. It's a jivara srupa hoy krishnara nichadas. That's the eternal constitutional position of the jiva is as a servant of Krishna. So even, we may not have full realization of that, but at least have that theoretical understanding that that's the ultimate goal. And slowly realization, Krishna within the heart will give us the intelligence how to achieve that. So Lord Chaitanya's, so of course Prabhupada mentions, he mentions about the demigods, but ultimately it's Krishna himself that we have to worship, because he's the ultimate, he's the sanction, one who gives sanction, the ultimate supply of everything, wherever it's material or spiritual benefits. So Lord Chaitanya, he's speaking to Tapana Misra, mentioned in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, that everything is accomplished by Harinam Sankirtan, including the goal of life. And the means for its attainment in this age of Kali, the only means of deliverance is the chanting of the names of Hari. There are no other way, no other way, no other way. This verse of names called the Maha Mantra. Chanting this mantra again and again will awaken the sprout of prema within the heart, and thus the goal of life and the means for its attainment is understood. Lord Chaitanya went on saying that he ordered everyone in great joy, listen to the Krishna Nam Maha Mantra. The Lord said, I spoke this Maha Mantra, perform japa of this mantra a prescribed number of times, all perfection will be attained through this. Chant this mantra every moment. There is no other rule. So, as I said, once again, Prabhupada, we're very fortunate that we've come in contact with Srila Prabhupada giving us the pure essence of the Vedas. We're not caught up in personalism or Mayavad philosophy or worshipping demigods, but Prabhupada gave us the the actual diamond, the rare jewel of the Vedic Siddhanta, that we're simply focused on Krishna, and our ultimate goal is Krishna Prem, and by his mercy eventually we can be transferred back to Krishna's own planet, Goloka Vrindavan. So I'll just read the verse again. In all sacrificial ceremonies, although sometimes a demigod is worshipped, the Supreme Lord Personality Godhead is worshipped because he is the super soul of everyone and exists both inside and outside like the air. Thus it is he only who awards all welfare to the worshipper. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments at all? Yes, sir.
In the Bhagavatam 2.4.10 it states that it is more effective to worship the devotee of the Lord. Did you speak about that?
Yeah, so that's a good point. That's why we accept spiritual master, because the spiritual master is the representative of Krishna. And it's far more pleasing to Krishna worshipping the devotee than worshipping Krishna himself. Because it means there's a element of humility is required. You know, we need to bow down to Guru, therefore we have Guru Puja every day, bowing down to the representative. And when the Guru is pleased, the devotees are pleased, then Krishna is pleased. It's like when we do any service, if the devotees are pleased with our service attitude, we understand that Krishna is pleased also. So it's a very good point that other traditions is just focusing on, because the Christians have Jesus Christ, so he's a representative of God, but many people think that he is God himself, so there's no intermediary. And where the Muslims, they have Muhammad, but a lot of the more hardline, they bypass Muhammad and want to go to Allah directly. But our philosophy is that we become the dasna, dasan, dasa, become the servant of the servant of the servant. And in that way, we're pleasing Krishna because we're pleasing his servants. So that's a very good point, thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.